Is this hack the easiest way to lower blood sugars? In today's episode, I want to share with you a bit of a deeper dive into how I accidentally discovered how to manipulate my blood sugars. Now, this came through an unfortunate circumstance where I was choking on water while training for my triathlon coming up, but the lesson learned, I think, is going to be very applicable to your life with mastering blood sugars in the same journey we're all on. So, if you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Vandevecht. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist. I live with type 1 diabetes and I experiment with blood sugars all the time so that I can bring you some of those findings and hopefully help you along this path of mastering blood sugars. So we'll get into the stories in a sec, but before we do, we're gonna hop into our theme song. I've spent the last 10 years pushing the limits while identifying trends and patterns in my type 1 diabetes management. Follow along as I learn, apply, and share the fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies that I've learned from diabetes experts around the world. The real question is, how can we live fearlessly with diabetes while maintaining stable blood sugars? This podcast is here to give you the answer. My name is Matt Vandevecht, head coach and co-founder of FTF Warrior, and welcome to Pardon My Pancreas. As I alluded to, I've been training for this triathlon coming up. I've got 2 weeks left. The last week, I had a new challenge, new obstacle to overcome, where it was the first week where I wasn't sick and I had to get back into my training cycle and just break all my personal bests to get back on track for training for this massive event that I've never done before. It was a completely impulsive decision to compete in a triathlon, and it's something that I decided I wanted to overcome and accomplish in my life. But these trainings have been no joke, and blood sugars aside, this is a difficult event for anyone, but blood sugars do require a lot of attention as I'm looking at the intensity and duration of these exercises that I'm completing. Now, today I went to the pool. Today's workout was a swim, and the swim itself, I decided I wanted to push myself to the limits and hit a new personal best. So last week, for the first time in 15 years, I completed a full mile swim. And I say 15 years because I've done it once before in my life when I was training to be a certified advanced open water lifeguard. And I used to want to be a beach guard and a firefighter. I went that whole route, got the education, EMT and all that. Decided it wasn't for me and went to educational spaces for blood sugars and became a master fitness trainer nutritionist. But all the stories aside, today I said, you know what? A mile swimming was not enough. I'm going to keep going. And so I'm going to go for a little bit further so I can feel good about myself and my progress that I'm making towards this triathlon. And so a full mile in a pool is 64 and a half-ish laps, or technically lengths of the pool, right? So there is one, back is two. There, back, there, back, there, back. You do it 64 and a half times. I rounded up and I wanted to go to 66. So I did 66 last time. This time I said, you know what? We're going for 70. I'm going to do 70 lengths of the pool, which for context, some people are thinking, wow, he's in great shape. He must always have been in great shape. Not the case at all. But the beginning of this training, I hopped in a pool. I swam there, back, and then I got out and I was done because I couldn't breathe. Turns out I was not in as good of shape as I thought I was. Now, of course, through training and proper nutrition, recovery, all that kind of stuff, I'm able to do, as today would show, 70 lengths of the pool. And I am stoked about that. I feel great. I really do. But what I wanted to bring to you within this story is that on the fourth length of the pool, like, a minute or two into it, I got distracted thinking about what I was going to talk about on this episode. I was like, what should I talk about today? And I completely forgot what lap I was on. 4 lengths of the pool in, which is, I guess that just speaks to my ADHD a little bit. But all that to say, I thought, okay, you know what? I think I'm at 4. I'm not 100% sure. I might only be at 2. I'm just going to go ahead and go with 2, right? And just that way I know when I hit 70, I've hit 70, maybe it's 72. Cool. And this speaks to a bit more of the disciplined side of how I approach life. A lot of people think, I think I might be at 4. We'll just say it's 4. And I'm like, no, I must be certain that I've completed the task that I set out to complete. So we're going backwards, right? And I'm going to make sure that I actually completed everything. So I get, 30 laps, 40 laps, 50 lap or lengths, technicalities, right? I get to mid 50s. And again, I forget. You have to keep in mind going down and forth every single time you have to count and add a new number. It's so boring. Like counting all of those laps, 1, 2, 3, and you're just having to repeat the lap number. Fun fact, and we'll get back on track, I promise. To count laps while I swim, I breathe every third stroke. So I stroke, 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 breathe, stroke, 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 breathe, right? Alternating breath sides. I count my laps using my strokes. So I go, this is 1, breathe. This is 1, breathe. This is 1. It's incredibly repetitive and boring, but that's my process for not forgetting where I am. But of course, it still happens. So mid 50s, I forget where I was. Shoot, was that 55 or 57? I don't know. Guess what I did? Pull it back, right? And so by the time I get to 70, my goal is not to get to 70-ish, it's to cross 70. So I am going to round up and pull the higher number that is required of me. So I know I did at least 70. There's a good chance that I did 74. So I round up to what is more challenging, to what is more beneficial for my future self. So the first piece of this lesson actually came from a mistake today where I rounded up because of my lack of attention to detail. Now, that benefits me in a number of ways. One, I know I can keep promises to myself because I completed 70 lengths of the pool. I did it, and I am 100% certain that I did it because I did at least 70. There's a chance I did 74, right? Because I lost track twice. Might be 72. I don't know, but I know it's above 70. That's the first one. Keep promises to myself. Number two, I know that I am disciplined enough to complete hard tasks. This is me reminding my brain that if there's a challenge in my life, it's a good chance I'm going to overcome it. And it's because I have shown my brain through repetition and consistency that I always complete the things that I say I'm going to complete, even if it's not pretty, which gets into number 4. I was choking on water the second time. That's why I forgot what lap I was on. I took in some water, and instead of stopping and taking a breather, I coughed it up and did my best to complete the 70 laps that I have. So that's just a side note. But this reminded me of a lesson that I learned when I was MDI or when I was taking injections as a diabetic. So early on, when I was first diagnosed, I was on syringes and vials of insulin. Not too long after that, a few years later, I went on multiple daily injections through pens or insulin pens, flex pens. Thought it was the coolest thing ever. Instead of a syringe and a needle, where I get weird glances at the airport, I've now got this fancy flex pen that looks inconspicuous, right? So I was excited about that, but it's only able to give full units of insulin. So if I ever wanted to give a half unit, I was unable to. You got to kind of just round up, round down. And I think that this is one thing that a lot of people don't recognize the power behind. And I remember I shared this with a client once on one of our coaching calls, and it blew their mind that they had the choice, right? So let's say for ease of discussion that I had an insulin to carb ratio of 1 to 10, meaning for every 10 carbs, I would take 1 unit. So if I had a meal that had 70 carbs in it, well, that would mean 7 units of insulin, right? Because 70 carbs divided by 10, which is the ratio of 1 to 10, gives me 7 units of insulin required for that meal. That would be mine. So what happens if I have a meal that was 65 grams of carbs? It doesn't divide equally into 10, right? So technically it's 6.5 units, but using a flex pen, I could only use whole units. And so it was either 6 units or 7 units. There was no in between. So there's 2 ways to look at it. The first way, and this is what blew my client's mind, is that I would have different options in the cupboards or in the fridge that were between 2 and 5 grams of carbs. So if I needed 5 grams of carbs to add to my meal to make it an even number, great. Now the dose is perfect, right? So I can give the full 7 units and add a single date, which is like 5 or 6 grams of carbs. Cool. Now it's 70 or 71 grams of carbs, perfectly even, 7 units. Let's go. Second option, this is what I wanted to talk about today, is pattern recognition and altering our strategies to manipulate the outcomes of our blood sugars. So if I'm at 65 grams of carbs for my meal, but my blood sugars have been running a little bit higher today. Maybe I didn't sleep very well last night. That can lead into some higher blood sugar numbers. Maybe I'm dehydrated. Maybe I'm stressed. Maybe I have lots of extra proteins and fat snacks today because those can lead into delayed spikes of blood sugars. Whatever it is, if I've recognized that I have higher blood sugars, sick days, right? If I'm sick, that can lead me into some higher blood sugars. Whatever it is, if there's a pattern of highs, I round up so that I have a little bit of extra insulin in circulation to kind of push blood sugars in the right direction. So if your goal is to optimize for lower blood sugars, this is where rounding up might be helpful. You might consider that. Now, quick caveat or break, pause, whatever. This is not medical advice in any capacity. For legal disclaimers, let's just say I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't listen to me. Consult with your doctors. I don't want to get in trouble for this. But when looking at insulin, and when looking at insulin, you have the power to decide how much insulin you give, right? And that's both a good thing and sometimes a not so good thing. So if I've got 65 carbs, I can add food, make it an even 70. Great. Now the ratios divide perfectly. That's not always possible, especially if you're eating out at a restaurant or at somebody else's house, right? So for me, when I was taking shots, I'm on an insulin pump now, but when I was taking shots, I would look at what is it that I'm optimizing for, right? Do I want to optimize for lower blood sugars or higher blood sugars? Here's the golden nugget I want you to take away from today. And by the way, if you haven't yet, definitely do hit the subscribe button. Let's just pause for a second. I want to see some subscribe buttons getting clicked right now because you're not going to want to miss the next couple of lessons we got. I'm going to be diving a bit deeper into specific strategies on blood sugar. So give you a second, hit the subscribe button. Promise you it's going to be worth it. And now let's resume. So the second piece to this, manipulating blood sugars, what am I optimizing for? If I recognize there's a pattern of higher blood sugars, I'll round up for my averages, or if you're on an insulin pump, I've called these ghost carbs in the past. If you don't know what that is, you're definitely going to watch some of the other videos that are on our channel. Do check it out. They're going to be insightful, hopefully eye-opening as well. We think a little bit differently on our channel here. But what I want you to understand is that you can also optimize for higher blood sugars. You're like, Matt, why would you want higher blood sugars? There are reasons, believe it or not. So if I have a particularly active day, maybe I'm helping a friend move, I might want to round down on my dosing, on my carb counts, because I want blood sugars to run just a little bit higher. And I'm not talking about not taking insulin, right? That's dangerous. It's really hard to come back from one of those meals where you forget to dose, right? But optimizing for a specific outcome, being intentional about the choices that we make with our blood sugars is what's going to give us the best outcome. So how can I optimize for low blood sugars? Round up. This is the round up method. It enabled me to keep my blood sugars at a lower average, which ended up lowering my A1C. And I didn't have a CGM back then, but I'm positive it increased time in range because it helped me to keep away from higher blood sugars. Now, what I want you to think about as well, though, is when you alter your doses, this is something that you have to be playing it safe with, right? Especially if you're not incorporating an expert like myself into your guidelines, if you're not seeking medical consultations or your doctor's advice, you're taking risk onto yourself. And I cannot stress that enough. Insulin can be a dangerous thing, right? But if you understand what you're doing, there are ways to manipulate not only your blood sugars, but also manipulating your insulin sensitivity, which we get into in some of our other videos on our channel. You look up, insulin on board and how to manipulate those factors on our channel. I'll leave a link up another video at the end of this one, so be sure to stick around for that. But understanding that you don't have to stick with the cookie cutter approach to diabetes that we've all been taught by our doctors, by our endos. It doesn't have to end there because we're all a little bit different, right? So when we look at optimizing for a specific outcome, do I want blood sugars to be lower on average? Well, what gets blood sugars to go lower? One of the things that we have as an option in our tool belt is insulin. Insulin lowers blood sugars. So maybe there could be something said about rounding up when you have a carb count, especially like when I go to a restaurant, I round up just because. Half the time they put some kind of sugar sauce in there that I'm unaware of, and rounding up gives me a little bit of a buffer that enables me to keep my blood sugars a bit more in range for those moments. So understand that that's not always going to be the answer. You're not always going to round up. Obviously, if you're experiencing a low blood sugar, that's not a great time to round up, right? So use your brain on this one, make informed decisions, think things through, be safe about it. But if you're trying to optimize for lower blood sugars, the roundup method might be for you. So I wanted to share that one with you guys. Obviously, my training schedule is a bit insane right now as I'm gearing up for this full distance triathlon, the Olympic distance. I've never done one before, but this lesson reminded me of a day many, many years ago when I was first diagnosed. The roundup method that I used unintentionally initially, I just thought I was trying to get to a close whole number, figured that was the easiest thing to do. But now I realize that you can actually choose, you can optimize your end result, your desired blood sugar based on the information you have. And this also comes into play with activity, with meals, macros. If you look at carbs, fats, and proteins, you might make different decisions on if you round up or round down or give an extended bolus or a split bolus. Pre-bolus comes into play here. This could go as deep as you want it to, but at the surface level, I want you to understand two things. One, you can manipulate the outcome of your blood sugars by rounding up or rounding down at its simplest, right? Number two, rounding up as a principle in life can be very helpful to your success overall. Rounding up can also be restated as doing hard things, doing one more, right? I chose not to assume that I had completed a lap, but to say, you know what? I can't remember with full certainty that I've completed that lap, so we're going to go backwards and redo it, right? I might have done 70 laps, I might have done 74, but the point is, I chose the harder path to get the outcome, which will inevitably make the outcome easier to achieve. So now when I go to compete in the triathlon, I know mentally I've done this before because I completed at least 70 laps or lengths, whatever. But two, I've built in that mental toughness of I can do hard things. I did one more. In this case, I did 4 more, right? So rounding up, using that as a mental pathway, a mental framework to do hard things, complete them, which will also help you in diabetes as well, because diabetes is no easy task. It's difficult and it changes on a daily basis. So it requires us to continually do hard things. All right, so final note on this, your insulin strategies cannot be static, meaning you can't just set it and forget it with your insulin to carb ratios, your basal or your long acting, your correction factors. These things need to adapt with life, right? Insulin to carb ratios, basal needs, insulin needs in general will change with aging, with weight changes, with lifestyle changes, diet, activity, stress levels, sleep, you name it. We need to be able to adapt with that. So if you recognize you've been rounding up, you've been rounding down for a week, 2 weeks, a month on end, that might be the sign you need to take a deeper look into this to see what's really going on. So rounding up, great Band-Aid fix. It can help you to make changes that are needed in the now. But if you have to keep doing it, it might be time to zoom out, see the big picture before you zoom in on one specific strategy and isolate to test, document, and adapt. All right. So I hope that was helpful. Obviously, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, or like halfway through, I do have another video for you if you're interested in lowering your A1C specifically. If you want lower averages with your blood sugars and that's what you're optimizing for, you're going to want to watch the video I've got on screen for you right now, 7 tips to lower your A1C. If you're listening on the podcast, you can go over to YouTube, type in 7 tips to lower your A1C, FTF Warrior. Should find it right away. Last chance, do remember, hit subscribe. We've got some really fun things we're working on for you in the next couple weeks. And I love seeing you guys in the comments. Feel free to give me any questions or thoughts you have if you want to get some clarity or further conversation on the topics of today. So watch that video next, the 7 tips to lower your A1C, and I'll catch you next time. Keep up the fight.